also to ask a question to Annie, and please, all of you, just join us and ask questions. First, Annie, how did you come about translating this book? And also because you translated with another translator, I just wanted to know, how did you work together? How was this collaborative work? How did it work?
So I came to this book through Margaret Jill Costa, who's I'm going to take my scarf off, sorry. I came to this book through Margaret Jill Costa, who had worked with Lydia a lot before, and the pair of them have a really kind of wonderful, long lasting friendship, and it felt really special to kind of get to sort of enter into that world. And so Margaret had long wanted to translate this novel and had been looking for a publisher and but she's always sort of extremely in demand and has a lot of book projects queuing up for her time. And so when she finally found a publisher for this, she wasn't sure she'd have time to do the whole thing by herself. So she brought me on board. I think partly because we'd been wanting to do a translation together for a while, I did a mentorship program with her. Um, I'd done that a few years before we worked on this book. And so we'd worked together before, and I think yeah, wanted the chance to kind of actually collaborate on something. And in terms of how we worked on the book, we ended up taking alternate chapters and translating a chapter each, sort of, and each chapter, before we shared it with the other person, the idea was to get it sort of as finished as it possibly could be before sharing it. But then, obviously, even if you think something's as finished as it possibly can be, by the time you share it with another person, there's still absolutely lots of comments that they'll have and lots of kind of like new ideas. And so each chapter went back and forth between us quite a few times, probably mine quite a few more times than Margaret's, who is very difficult to edit because her translations are always so perfect. But yeah, so each chapter kind of went back and forth between us, and then got gradually one at a time stored in this increasing in size master document. And then at the end, we each read through that, um, sort of to get the full picture, because also it's a novel full of echoes and full of repeated phrases, repeated ideas, repeated images. And some of that we only really noticed in that final stage of reading the whole thing and seeing everything together. And so it was sort of, yeah, exciting to have the whole thing at the end and for it all to come together.
Okay, and just one more question to Annie. Do you, because we were discussing just while we met before we started the session about the introduction. So you said the idea was the publisher wanted to, just ask you to write an introduction. And could you talk maybe a bit about why do you think it was important and how you thought it would be useful for an English reader?
Yeah, sure. I'm thinking back, I can't remember whether the initial idea was the publisher or not, but I think it definitely was excitedly, enthusiastically taken up by the publisher if it was a suggestion. I think because the book was going to come out in the States, and I think the publisher was wondering, like, they wanted it to be read by more readers than probably already had a particularly detailed idea of Portuguese history. And so I think the idea of writing it was partly to sort of give the readers the context that we thought they'd need to fully appreciate even just the scope of the book and how much is contained within it. And um, yeah, kind of to show what Lydia is doing in a way, to show what's happening with this factory, to show that this factory really is the history of the factory is kind of the history of Portugal in recent decades, and kind of to show that that was what was happening in the novel. I think we thought that writing it, including this, would be a helpful thing. Although I was saying to you, Christina, before, just beforehand now, that it was a difficult thing to write because they wanted it to come at the beginning. And so it's difficult to sort of sum up the full context of a book without giving away the plot or without making readers think, oh, well, we don't need to read it now. We know what happens. So it was kind of a difficult thing trying to cover everything, but without saying exactly how the information was going to be relevant to the readers. So that was a bit of a challenge, but I think it was a good thing to do, and it was also just a useful. I think it was a useful exercise for me to sort of think through and put in a much more sort of orderly form in my head all of the bits of research that I'd been doing. Of course, during the course of the translation, there'd been lots and lots and lots of research, and to have to sort of put it all into one text clarified, I think, some of it in my head as well.